This is a really short video looking at what actually is sociology and why you should consider studying at A-level. And these are two of the main questions I normally get asked when students don't really know much about the subject itself. And there is a wealth of information out there, and I really suggest that you Google it and you find out whether you can find something that you're interested in about sociology. One thing to remember is sociology really is all around you. It's and what you're wearing, it's the food you eat, it's the educational institution you end up going to, it's everywhere. There is political sociology, examining, why wars happen, the nature of power in society. Sociology also looks at things like popular culture, why particular people are famous, what things they do and what influence they have on everyday people, whether they be young, old, or what have you. Sociology examines some of the biggest social movements going on in the world at the moment, whether they be, the G20 protests, or even, social movements towards supporting candidates such as Trump, for example. What do those movements really mean? And there's also things like the sociology of sport. Sport is this fantastic platform which people play these games together and compete for the prize of winning a trophy or what have you. And yet there's this other much darker side of sport sociology, that they examine the level of corruption in sport today, and some of the most elite boards such as FIFA are kind of embroiled in some scandal that sociologists are very interested in examining at the moment. So sociology really is all around us. You can do the sociology of pretty much anything from tomatoes to toasters, for example. So, what is sociology? Sociology really is all about studying people in society and patterns of social behaviour. Some might ask, what is society? Well, society is everything around us. It is this notion that we are all individuals, and we're connected to all the other individuals around us and all the institutions around us as well. A bit like being on branches on a tree or leaves on a tree, for example. And we look for patterns of social behaviour, and we try and explain these patterns or try and resolve these patterns if maybe they're not so positive for society. One example you might want to look at are what sort of names are popular in 2016, 2015, or the year you were born. What was the most popular names? The fact that there are trends in names seems to indicate that people aren't just making individually isolated decisions, they're being influenced by other forces, whether they be family, peers, the media, or bigger social events, such as World War II, which I admit was more than a social event. You can see how the name Adolf was fairly popular up until World War II, and now it's pretty much petered out into being a non-existent name. So clearly people are taking into account the fact that Adolf is a name of a famous historical character, Hitler, and therefore they're not using it. So therefore they're not making a completely independent choice, they're being influenced by other social pressures not to name their child Adolf. So I guess before I studied sociology, I thought I was independent, I thought I was completely free, I thought I was the one who was really in charge of what I did, what I thought, what I said, what I wore, what have you. And I love sociology. However, one thing it has proved to me was that I'm perhaps not as free, as independent, or as in control as perhaps I first realised. I've come to the understanding that really I've been shaped by a range of social forces and social factors. For example, I've been really influenced by my family. They've influenced the person I've become today, my friends, certainly my work. My job as a teacher is one of the core sources of my own identity. My education had a huge amount of influence on me and where I actually studied in the country, for example. And I think the media on a day-to-day basis does really influence me as well. The things I think are fashionable, the stuff I think is cool, or even the things that I just end up feeling really quite horrified by. But it's more than just the things and the people around me. It's also stuff about myself that influences what I do. So my social class, how well off I am, really does kind of influence the things I do and how I think and the activities I can get on with. I didn't want to believe it, and I don't like thinking about it, but really my gender has had a significant impact on, definitely does affect how I dress again, but it also really has affected how well I've done, which makes me feel a bit uncomfortable. My ethnicity has definitely affected me, and it affects everyone in a very different way. And unfortunately, my age is really starting to affect me as well. And the sort of behaviour, for example, that's appropriate for someone of my age to do might be significantly different to what it's appropriate for you to do. And these are all, if you like, a mixture. At the top, we've got social institutions, and at the bottom, social factors. These influence us on a day-to-day basis. And it really is, I've shifted away from this notion that I am an independent being fully in control of my destiny. However, one thing you realise about sociology when you start studying it, if you do, is that there's a lot of disagreement in sociology about what's really going on. And that's kind of one of the things I love about the subject, and many other people do, is there is plenty of debate and discussion and analysing completely different viewpoints, especially about the nature of society and what it does. When we think about whether society is in control of us, there's a mixture of views of whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. Some people, like the image on the left, suggest that actually it's great that we all are part of a society that influences us and controls us, because it means that we all get along with each other and we all work together to create a much better society for everybody. It's a harmonious environment that's good for everyone involved. And then on the right-hand side, you've got a different viewpoint, this idea that actually the way our society is organised is really unfair. Like, you've got people at the bottom who do all the hard work, and then you've got richer people who kind of exploit those people underneath them, and then above them you've got this, the armed forces and the police, and this notion that society really is not structured in a way that benefits everyone. It's kind of geared towards the interests of maybe the better off people in society. And that system is generally very critical of the economic system, capitalism, that we're in. And another theory, or feminism, argues that, we're in a society altogether, however, it's not that equal, so it's not that great. And actually, women aren't as equal to men for a variety of reasons in a variety of ways. But that's a good thing about sociology. There's no unified agreement about what type of society we're in. What kind of questions can sociology help us answer? One might be, why is men's sport always on the TV and we don't really get much women's sport? And effectively, what does this really tell us about society? What I find really interesting is the fact that we still get quite a lot of gendered specific, whether it's toys or objects or fashion, in supermarkets or shopping centres. And there's an example of one on the left here from the States, a full-size basketball just for males plus 12. So does that suggest that maybe women aren't playing as much sport because they've chosen not to, or is society perhaps pressurising women out of sport because it's not really seen as a feminine thing to do? Although I will accept that we're getting far more female sport on TV now, which is absolutely fantastic. Another question you might want to consider, why are some social groups discriminated against in today's society? And what kind of drives that discrimination? Where does it come from? And more importantly, I guess from a sociological point of view, what impact does that discrimination have on that particular group in the short term, like the psychological harm, but also in the long term? If you get a group that's discriminated against over a long period of time in one society, what kind of hostility and suspicion does that generate between those groups? When I try and convince people that sociology or society exists and there are social causes for things that happen, this is one of the areas I tend to focus on. The fact is that we have a huge disparity in the health of different groups living in the UK. The UK is a developed society, we have a great NHS, and yet there are huge gaps in, for example, the health and the life expectancy, depending on your social class, your gender, and even your ethnicity. And for example, the map at the top, that little red area, that's an area called Tower Hamlets. The women who live in Tower Hamlets live 18 years less than women who live in Richmond, which is the bottom map there in West London. And sociologists would say, hey, that gap's enormous. What on earth is happening? Because the areas are really close together geographically. They're all in London. They must share similar types of services. And yet the gap in life expectancy is pretty enormous. 18 years, that's a lifetime for someone your age. Which kind of brings me to what's the point of sociology? What can we do about all these things? And this is a quote from a famous sociologist, Howard Becker. And essentially, he argued that the good sociology, the point of sociology, is that it provides or produces meaningful descriptions of organisations or events or issues like the ones I've discussed with you, and valid explanations of how these things tend to happen, what explains these patterns. And most importantly, they come up with realistic proposals for their improvement or removal. So all those questions I've talked to you about, sociologists have been researching, they have found solutions, they've presented them to governments and what have you, and that's what sociology is about, I guess. It's figuring out what's wrong and trying to make things better. So, why should you study sociology? Study sociology if you want a different perspective on what's going on in the world, looking at things from a totally different viewpoint. One of the things I always remember being taught when I studied sociology at A-level was never trust the big stories in the media, that the headline grabbers. When the big stories are out, whether it's about Kim Kardashian getting mugged in Paris, or what have you, try and look what's going on behind the scenes. What's the story that they're possibly trying to distract you from that might be a bit boring, it might be a bit technical, but really that's the story we should all be paying attention to. And that really is about you developing critical thinking skills, looking at stuff from a different perspective. You should study sociology if you want to understand what it's like to come from a different social background to your own, to find out what is it like, for example, to wear a niqab or a burkini or a headscarf. What's it like from a completely different cultural perspective to want that of your own? And if you really want to work with people from different backgrounds when you're older, sociology can really benefit that. And if you really want to examine some of the huge inequalities going on in the UK and around the world, and hopefully try and come up with some of the solutions to these inequalities, you should consider studying sociology. Because the old saying from George Orwell's Animal Farm does still stand very true. So all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And that's the job of the sociologist, to find out who still is unequal and perhaps try and make life a bit better for them. So, if you are interested in sociology, but you want to know what else you could be after studying sociology, here is a detailed list of some of the possible careers involving sociology. I'm more than happy to talk to any of you about it around the college. I've taken this directly from the Manchester University website for sociology, but this should give you a notion of some of the vast range of careers that sociology can really help with. Thanks for listening. Bye.